And we,
With your
Okay,
permission, I
good.
started
All right.
recording because I realized your information is very
yes,
valuable.
good, no, thanks, Ayla. So,
I should have.
I advocated for, we get about $110 million a year from this half cent sales tax. And so I advocated for, $1 million a year countywide for unincorporated areas every year. So that was successful, it was approved by the Board of Supervisors. We haven't yet allocated that to the individual areas. I feel confident, El Sobrante will get some amount of money, which should be sufficient, at least for park maintenance. Is it gonna be 50,000 a year, 75,000 a year? I don't know, but we're gonna work on that piece of it. So that solves a big issue, and I wanna take that back to this site, which puts in perspective. So the other park funding we get is what's called a park dedication fee. When a house is built, we collect a fee, so does the city, and the money for homes built in the unincorporated area, we put into a fund for El Sobrante. Richmond has one park, I think, on the city side of El Sobrante, right, Lemoyne or Chief Park, I think. Yes. The reason there's, a little history, there's not more parks in the city side, is because in the 80s and 90s, 70s, 80s and 90s, when Carriage Hills and all that area was built, the city collected a lot of money for parks. Again, well, before you were on the council, it did not keep the money in El Sobrante. It spent the money citywide. Under state law, you're supposed to spend it in the area to benefit the properties that were built. Richmond did not do that. Hence, that's why you have only that one park. So there's been a lot of complaints over the years by El Sobrante residents that the money was spent in other parts of the city. We don't have parks because we didn't have a park department and we didn't have a funding source. So the park dedication fee that we did collect for, it's not a lot of development in our unincorporated areas. We spent about $1 million over 15 years to build out the park area you see here. It started with the Children's Reading Garden, the amphitheater, working with the watershed project, and we designed it in a way to minimize maintenance because we didn't really have maintenance. So the library maintains some of it, and the watershed project does an amazing job. And then we use the last piece of it to fix up the Friends of the Library building and turn it into more of a community space for the Historical Society and the Friends and the Spawners. So that's where we spent, that was $1 million over many years. We currently have about $60,000 in that park dedication account, which will build over time, not a lot, to be used for capital only for a park in El Sobrante. And then we have, I think most importantly, it costs money to maintain a park, could be 50 to 100,000 a year. In our public works department, the county needs a maintenance source of funding before it builds a park. So I think we had put a group together to go to the ballot to try to pass. We won't need to do that with this fund. Little history, the MAC back in the 80s or 90s went to the ballot to try to raise money for parks in El Sobrante and failed badly. It takes a 2/3 vote, really hard to get. So the good news is I don't think we'll need to go to the ballot because we'll get this maintenance fund money from Measure X. The other thing sort of related to this that will result maybe in new money is we are in the middle of redoing a general plan called Envision Concord Costa 2040. And we're putting policies in on environmental justice, sustainability, health, and economic development. And the policies for El Sobrante include making most of the Dam Road and Appian Way mixed use. So it's commercial / residential. We're seeing more vibrancy with that, right? And as homes get built or units get built, we'll collect more money for parks. A little history, we want to clock back 20 years. When we had redevelopment in El Sobrante, one of the things that we wanted to study was a path along the creek. The community in El Sobrante fought us trying to do eminent domain. So we did not do any eminent domain. We decided there was too much community opposition. So there wasn't really an ability to try to get something like that done, which also would be very expensive, but we were at least looking at that. And one of the things we are doing is we just finished and had a community meeting on creating a bike lane to basically calm traffic, reduce San Pablo Dam Road from Appian Way to Councilor Ranch Road from 4 lanes to basically set up 2 lanes in each direction, 1 lane in each direction, and a middle turn. And then a bike lane. So that would go from Counselor Ranch to here, so sort of combine, sort of connected to the park issue. The obstacle will be, how do we get through because of the narrow configuration of the damn road in downtown, that's gonna be a harder issue, but at least between Appian Way and Counselor Ranch, to basically build a bike lane, we'll have to get funding and reduce traffic, slow traffic down. So that's also happening. Also, for many years, there has been a lot of support for the businesses in the community about a park/town center. We have also been in discussions with Mechanics Bank over their interest in possibly giving us the parking lot. I don't know what will happen to turn that into a town center/park. And as another, right? So I think we're all keeping our minds open. The Maori side is the Mechanics Bank parking lot site where that's converted to a town center and a park. So I think there's a lot of important energy that needs to be put in by the community as we look at these things. So ultimately, for any of these sites, we're gonna need capital to build it, right? And it costs millions of dollars to build. And so that's gonna be, I think, the biggest challenge is how do we come up with the capital to build it? I think that's what we wanna put our heads together on. The good news is we have now the maintenance money. That was an obstacle. We don't have much saved. We have $60,000, right, in a park dedication fund that will grow. There could be grants. So I think that's sort of where we are. Make sure if I had any other things I wanted to say. I have been involved in tax measures. I mean, I was a co-author of Measure AA. I'm on the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. If you know about that, we successfully passed with 70% of the vote, $12 parcel tax for the whole Bay Area that raises $500 million over 25 years for access to the Bay wetland restoration. That we sold that on a vision about the Bay. I think we would need to, any community support here, the vision of a park. It's really important to have that. I will say, the other thing we're doing on park issues is we're working with the school district to basically use some of our health funding to subsidize any nonprofit youth group in West County that wants to use the school facility. Whether it's a soccer field, a football field, a baseball field, or a gym, we're about to approve that. It'll probably be less than $500,000 a year. It comes out of sustainable funding we have. So if a youth group wants to use a field at Vianza, right now they pay $20 an hour to use a field, but they didn't have to pay the district $70 to $80 an hour for the personnel, the maintenance, the custodian. That's what's expensive. We are going to pick up that cost. So we're going to pick up like $70 an hour out of the youth groups we met with and said, this is great. We only have to pay $20 an hour. And so that'll happen. So that'll open up. And we're also working with the school district to get their fields to be used, to be open more. They close a lot of them because of issues related to liability and all these other things. So we're really trying to leverage the district, and they're working with some of the youth groups to do that, but we're gonna pick up that cost, the $70, $80 an hour for the youth groups. So that'll open up, I think, some of the parks, some of the school district sites for youth groups, separate issue than all of this. I think so. That's, I think, what I wanted to cover. We're hoping to approve the general plan changes this summer, which again change the policies. Our general plan does include a policy about a park/town center for downtown El Sobrante, so that's in our land use policies. But the realistic issue is getting a site that works. I appreciate there's been a lot of work done on the Maui site. There are public, we have to look at all of the issues. What are the costs? Public Works has identified there could be some soil contamination issues that could be expensive. We don't know unless there's a full study on all of that. There are residents in North Richmond raising many issues there, so that's just something we need to look at and do that. So with that, I'll stop. And then I wanted to introduce Ronnie Mills, who represents El Sobrante in my office. He's our newest staff person, and folks on the MAC know him. So he will be our staff person working on these issues. And Ronnie did work for Richmond Main Street. I know you talked about the business improvement district. We have talked in the past to businesses, and there hasn't been a lot of I think that's a sensitive issue that takes, and the chamber can talk about that, whether or not there's support to do that, I don't know. That's something that we appreciate the chambers here, the Max here, and all of you. So, that's just, thanks again for all of your efforts on this. We're trying to keep our options open of what works, what can we do, at least, put the money together, work with the community, find the right site. I'm glad to see that this site is getting used more, and I want to acknowledge the triangle. I know we're working to try to approve, the street closure up there for a farmer's market on a Sunday, at the triangle, which would be great. And I know there's a lot of interest in how to do synergy between what's happening there, what's happening here on this site, and what would happen in the park on the dam. I will say, it is extremely, extremely expensive to build a bridge over a creek. I just want to say that, millions of dollars. So I do think, that I'm a realist. We need to build a park, but we have to also sort of adjust our expectations for what the cost is gonna be and what our priorities are, what we're gonna get done. Dealing with fish and game and all of that and all of those issues can be very, very expensive. We saw it would be really expensive to try to build the path along the creek. I think that remains a great vision. And so there's a lot of things happening. I think the community needs to prioritize where it wants money spent.
I have one question and a clarification. I think you said in the eighties it went on the ballot and it was 70% were.
Oh, no, I said, we passed Measure AA with 70% in the Bay Area.
Okay,
This measure didn't, it needed 2/3 to pass. I don't even know if it got 50%. I'd have to pull it. It was well short of 2/3.
oh,
And it was I don't remember, I can, it was a tax for parks in El Sobrante. It was done in the eighties.
uh-huh.
I think one thing to say, it was done only in the unincorporated area because that was where the zone would be set up. Richmond is separate,
Mhm.
right? And if you look at the voting history, it is really hard passing tax measures. There was a measure just about 10, 15 years ago, you remember this, I think, about funding for a resident deputy in El Sobrante, and that lost, and that was a high priority. So I think getting 2/3, which is why we wanted to get the maintenance money without having to go to the ballot. So I think that getting the Measure X money does away with the need of going to the ballot.
Okay.
So I don't know, it may have gotten around 50%, something like that. I don't even know if it got that. I have to look back. I was trying to find it.
There's a question in the chat about how much is needed to purchase the property and clean it up and build it out.
Well, I think Sharon said it's around $1 million to buy it, right? I mean, who owns it now, Sharon?
The car wash.
The car wash. The car wash illegally, without getting a permit, expanded their car wash to the new site they bought, that asphalt area. So code enforcement, after some of you complained, code enforcement with the county went in, and that's why they blocked it off, because they didn't get a permit to do that. There's estimates of building a park depend upon what you do in the park. I know, Sharon, you put up an estimate. Our public works folks, they do parks, they thought your estimate was low. Whatever the estimate is, it's a lot. What was the estimate of yours?
8 million.
8 million? Yeah, and to build it? Yeah,
No, that included the acquisition.
yeah, so 7 to build, 1, yeah. Our public works thought it could be more, the biggest issue they were not clear about was the soil contamination issues. Those could cost more. You don't know until you do a full study. There was a gas station there. There was some pesticide use on the site. You can speculate, but until you do the analysis, you don't really know.
Well, we can get grants.
It's So how does a full study get funded?
Well, that's the question. I think they said a study could be about 100, but did they say it was, I have it in my notes. I did a whole memo to our working group. I'll have to pull it out. I should have brought it.
I'm in the process of
Right.
trying to find out more information.
Yeah, it was,
about that.
but it was, our public works who do this for a living, understand, they said it could cost about $100,000 to do a study. And so we don't have any money for that. I mean, unless we use our park funding to do that study, that's possible, but that assumes we also get site control, and you don't want to buy property until you do the soil analysis, right? You just, because if all of a sudden it's millions of dollars, right? I mean, you do an analysis before you buy it. So I think that's part of the issue is at some point, if this site's available, I mean, I assume they still wanna sell it, I don't know, they haven't come to the county yet with an application, I assume they bought this property to build something on it.
They don't have,
The car wash bought it, right, Sharon?
the car wash
The car
bought
wash.
it, and they were really, they only wanted it to do what you see
Right,
now.
right.
They don't know what's gonna happen yet with the
Yeah.
park area.
I mean, I do think, you know, until you do a full, really analysis, Public Works thought that the creek, the park development near the creek would be more expensive, because you have issues dealing with fish and wildlife, you have issues of the creek banks and things like that. So whatever the estimates are, I think we don't really know yet, and, you know, the fiscally responsible thing to do is to figure that out, if this is a.
Well, there are lots of grants coming out from the state, and $15 million. You
Yeah.
can apply.
Yeah, and I know that you
There's
applied,
lots of money
right, you
out there.
applied, and, I mean, and I think it's finding the right it's easy to say there's lots of money. I've been on the board for 25
I
years.
know it's not easy to
And
get.
I can tell you, Richmond, not your district, but other parts of Richmond are better positioned for many of these grants, because the last round of grants, as you know, you did a good application to try to get funded for the park, and it didn't get funded because this, often the priority for a lot of the park grants, not all, are low-income communities, and El Sobrante doesn't fall into that category. So like there was funding for some other parks around Richmond, as you know. So, I mean, it's easy to say there's money out there, and as your representative, Congressman Garamendi knows, it's a lot harder to get those grants. And our public works, I mean, I think we are open to looking at all of that, but at least if we need a grant now, it's only for the capital and construction. We don't need a grant for the maintenance side of things.
I have a thought here. So I'm hearing that the Maui property is now the car wash I mean, it's owned by the car wash, right? But what I'm hearing is that maybe they just want a little bit more space for their car wash. So if there was some sort of negotiation that could be made, and I really don't know a lot of it, so there might be details I'm
Yeah.
missing, but they could be given the rest of the part that they want, like that they built on, that they're not permitted for, so somehow that's worked out. And then they, you know, give the rest of it if they're not interested in the rest of it. And then the second thought, and obviously that's like a negotiation with them, it sounds like the cards are in their hands, but, and the other thought I had is, I totally get that, building along water is very like shifty, and there's a lot of expense that goes with near the water, but it sounds like a lot of the property, it's like a long piece of property, right? What if it was just started like closer to the street?
Yeah.
Like, just some sort of beginning little footprint, and not have like the thing be, how much does it cost to realize that whole beautiful plan?
Yeah, that's possible. I think that's where you would do the analysis of the site where the gas station was, to see what's the cleanup cost, if any, for that portion of it. So you would need to probably spend, you know, I don't know, would it be 1,500,000, whatever, so in that range to do a study of the site. Yeah, I mean, and then could you negotiate with them to give you the property at well below market value? I don't know what the profit motive is. I don't know if you talked to them. Yeah, so I mean, these are people who are particularly wanting to give property away, unfortunately.
What did
They
pay,
want to sell it. Huh?
Pardon?
What did they pay for it, $1 million?
They paid 865 or 75.
So they wanna make a profit off of their community, keeping the part they want and selling it for more than what they paid.
They
Well,
wanted to
so you know where we did something like this, and Serge will remember, an individual bought the Adachi Nursery site to build a gas station and convenience store. And when they came to see us, because they were applying to the county, you know, they wanted to do alcohol, tobacco, and I said, you know, that we're not gonna allow any more alcohol outlets and no tobacco. And as soon as they found that out, they realized they really couldn't make a profit, on that site. And I know we linked them to Planning Justice and to, Pastor McLean on the Mac and her church, and they bought the property and are turning it into this wonderful site. And that was because they knew they weren't gonna get approved for any, with tobacco and alcohol. So I didn't think, I don't know if we would have approved a gas station convenience store there, right? That was not a very good use. So that's pushed them to negotiate with the two nonprofits to buy the land and turn it into what it is, what it will be, which is great. Now, yeah, are these folks gonna search, you know, to get some approval and then we would negotiate? I don't know. They haven't come to us. I don't know what it is. So there's this site, and the only other site, Sharon said we were looking around, is potentially the Mechanics Bank site. We don't know where that will go, but there's been some discussion, you know, about whether because they don't need that whole parking lot, whether that is converted into a town square, town center / park as well. That's a possibility. The last thing I will say about, before I got on the board of supervisors, when they and it was a bad decision, spent some park money to buy a landlocked parcel for a park near De Anza. And surrounded by homes, and it can't be used as a park, so the county owns this piece of property that it can't do anything with. We explored whether we could do solar on it and use the solar for a park, and we did an analysis and found that would work. So I wanna make sure, if we're gonna put public money into a site, that it can be developed into a park and not sit for 25 years like a site near De Anza. We wanted to sell it to De Anza when they were doing the rebuilding the school, and they didn't want it. And so that's the only other thing. So I just want to make sure we're gonna, you know, fiscally get a site and build a park or build a town center or whatever.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Mozart Circle over there, they've had lots of issues with their roadway washing away and taking years to rebuild. There's probably discussion over there in the home association or whatever, or city of Richmond, I would hope, saying, gee, maybe we need a bridge across into the county area, and maybe city of Richmond would help finance this. And I grew up, in the Bay Area, of course, here, and I just remember 280 down in San Jose being this sculpture for 20 years or how long. It's done now, it's used now. You know, if we built just the beginning of a bridge, and Richmond had a beginning of a bridge, I bet you that bridge would get built. It's not in my lifetime maybe, but I bet it would get built. And that's the thing.
And I want to make sure I'm acknowledging
We don't want to do that.
Sharon's hard work and vision for many years here. If we had an unlimited amount of money, we could make this vision happen, right? If we had this unlimited amount of money. So, but, right. No, but so I want to acknowledge that. I mean, and so in the real world, I've learned there's so much money. What's the money we can get? What can we build? What can we do? And yeah, I'm not saying we don't get it. Hey, we went to the ballot, got 500 million for the Bay, and no one thought we were going to do that. We got 110 million for the county, Measure X in the middle of the pandemic. So yeah, El Sobrante is a hard place to pass things, but I think looking for grants and opportunities, they're not easy to come by, but I think we want to look for those. And I think that's the good news is we have a name.
Serge has his hand up on the Zoom. Go ahead, Serge.
Yeah, I just wanted to react a little bit to what John was saying about a couple of points. One is about the Adachi saga. What did seem to play kind of a pivotal moment was some kind of hard-pressed discussion and negotiation with the developer. From a community perspective. And the situation now with a tire place is much different because they're there, they're doing business there, they've been there for a long time. But that Adachi experience taught some of us, it's surprising what human communication can do. If one is speaking from a place of kind of representing the community interests. And again, it's harder to do when the cat's out of the bag and the landowner's there. But I would encourage hope on that. And then the other note was, I think sometimes people are more afraid than they really need to be relative to the Department of Fish and Wildlife, relative to doing things in stream zones. There's kind of an art to that, and it's not as bad as a lot of people think. Now, the Regional Water Quality Control Board can be a somewhat different and surprising player, but if and when we get far enough, there's people that can help us figure out how to thread those needles.
Good point, sure. One thing I was going to say, I think if we're trying to keep options open, maybe we could do a parallel track One is trying to get an option on this property with maybe, they usually have to pay for an option, but to get an option on the Maui property to buy it for a defined amount of money at the option of the county if we resolve the soil issues and come up with the funding, right? I mean, that's an option. That way it holds our right while also pursuing the mechanics bank site, right? I think that those kind of things open up our options. So I used to practice law. I haven't in 20-something years. So I'm a little familiar with land use issues and got obviously dealt with it for the county for 25. But I do think there's some leverage that we have with the owners because they're going to want some approval to do something. We can't do quick pro quos, right? But if we can get an option on the property to hold it, define it, and then figure out what we need to do on further analysis, and then also explore the mechanics bank site, which maybe we get that for free or very minimal, and then figure out what would that take to make a town center / park. So we can, and I don't know of any other sites, right, that are realistic. We did talk about with the Boys and Girls Club used to own the site, right, where on Appian Way, where, who's there now? That's the, Elks Club, is that the Elks? No, not the Elks. The Boys Club, right. And their vision, when it was Boys and Girls Club, because they own land on the other side, was to build a bridge over the creek to access all their land on the other side. Guess what? They found it would cost millions of dollars to build that bridge over that creek to get to their land on the other side, and they didn't have the money. They had to pull it up at night and nobody sees it. I like that, right? But as you know, the Moose Lodge now is that side, right?
I have a question about the park funds allocation. So as you mentioned, El Sobrante is never qualified for any kind of EJ grants, and that is how the state makes prioritizing decisions. Yes, which I support health equity, I support environmental justice, but there's also an invisible population of maybe 300 unhoused folks in the community. We do have EJ issues here for sure that are not captured by Cal Screen or the other mechanisms of how decisions are made. So I'm wondering, just how can we equitably disperse park allocation, allocate these funds to communities that need parks.
The $1 million a year I made that an equity ask, because my colleague Supervisor Anderson from the San Ramon Valley, I said, look, you've got parks that are funded by your voters and so she gets that she's probably not going to get a lot of this money. I mean, ultimately it's going to be 3 votes of the Board of Supervisors about how this money is allocated, right? And so, that's why I supported her on something in her district, but I wouldn't have otherwise supported, just because, how do we work together and get support? But, I mean, $1 million sounds like a lot, but divide it up, and obviously, we don't have a park now, so money that we can accumulate, and can we get some more? I mean, those are all the politics of what we're gonna look at and try to do. I'm confident that we'll get enough to do maintenance. Can we get more? Maybe it's allocated by supervisorial district based on need, and we used $1 million in park funds to help launch Urban Tilt's North Richmond Farm. We had $1 million lined up in North Richmond park development fees, and when we had 3 acres of land, Urban Tilt now owns that land, is building a wonderful farm. Started with sort of our funding, and now they've gotten a lot more funding. So, because there was a lot of development there. So we can let money accumulate here, and I'm glad to hold it and reserve it for whatever our downtown park, town square project is.
And the Maui project is more or less opposite to the mechanics.
Yeah, it is.
So would there be able to be moved like a crosswalk or something?
Yeah, I mean,
that
we
so
could,
could link together?
you could do both eventually. So I mean, I think.
And do you have any sense of how much it would cost? I mean, the whole mechanics bank has just been floated as a general idea, but I don't think there's been any plan.
It's all about we get access. I mean, our biggest challenge, right, is how do you also deal with the flow? I mean, we're trying to create a bike lane on San Pablo Dam Road, and getting through downtown El Sobrante from Appian Way here is more of a challenge. We can create a bike lane, dedicated bike lane from Appian Way out to Castro Ranch, and that's good. There are going to be people complaining about losing a lane of traffic, but we did an analysis that showed it would only increase your travel time depending on, in peak hour, depending on direction, from 10 seconds to 2.5 minutes, maybe, something like that. I don't know.
Start in one lane going the other way,
Yeah.
like the slide.
Right. So,
A
people
year ago.
complain about taking 2 minutes longer to get travel this
No,
fast.
no,
I'm
I
not
know
saying I
people are
agree.
gonna complain, I'm
Right.
just saying there's one lane already missing
Yeah.
basically for parts of that.
Yeah, but I mean, and then we have to get funding for that.
To fix.
But I think we have a lot of challenges, as the Chamber, the MAC, and others know, about how do we do things to downtown. Clearly, this is the center. When we were doing redevelopment, I was hoping we would do eminent domain to be able to do things like a path along the creek and things like that. But, because now you have to get every single property owner's permission. And they may not all, and the part of the problem downtown for a park or whatever is you have these little scattered sites. We developed the parklet policy with, remember Josh Bratt, who was with Urban Creeks Council, and then Josh now is working with us on a wetland project. He and other residents in El Sobrante we developed this parklet policy, but no restaurants have yet taken advantage of it here. So hopefully, we can do that. So I want to work with your energy and figure out what we could do. And I'm glad to talk to the owners and say, hey, maybe, is there an opportunity to do an option agreement, as long as they don't charge a lot of money for it, and that holds the property for a certain period of time. We could use that $60,000 that we have set aside for park dedication to pay for that. We could. So we'd have to start to talk to them. You would think they'd want to be friendly with us, because they have to go through the county to get approval for something, right? And I can't imagine if they bought that whole site just to extend their car wash by
That's all they
3 feet.
want to.
That's what I.
And that was, they wanted to work a deal early on to try and.
So they
just
paid
get that
like
piece of-
800,000 so they could expand their car wash by like 20 feet?
I have a theory, but I won't say.
What's your theory?
No longer anyway.
Huh? Well, we talked to the prior folks who had options on the property, like a tire company and all, or auto, and they weren't anxious about wanting to give away their property either, unfortunately. I know, I'm not gonna ask Richmond to come up with money, because you got your own parks in Richmond, right? It's,
Wouldn't it be a nice little bridge park, the Mozart Circle? Oh, no.
let's stick with this. And I don't know, maybe you, but I'm glad there's energy back here. And I want to acknowledge the effort happening at the Triangle, because I think that's a really important thing. And that, you've got this great, development there at the Adachi site, and how to connect that to this library to downtown. And look, I think this site should get used more in the meantime. We did spend $1 million to create, this is a mini park, right? There is this, wonderful amphitheater named after your dad, who worked so hard for years. Your dad was involved with the park measure.
Yeah.
I wish he was here so we could talk to him about it,
Mm-mm.
because they wanted to do that. There was a parks issue here back in the 80s.
I have a question.
But it's not about Mozart Court.
No, that's good too. No, it's all, no trespassing in the creek here, I like to go hiking around, hiking creeks and all that a lot. And I don't understand who's in control of it here. Is it because they don't want stuff to fall off the bridge, or is it because they might flood you from the dam if they release? Or is it,
Well, I don't think you want to necessarily go down into the habitat and ruin the habitat of the creek. And there were a number of individual, one of the issues on the fencing, there were individuals sleeping at the creek and defecating in the creek. And it did cause some health issues, and
I
so,
think if you let the general public down there more and all that, then the people might not live there, because they're wrecking it.
it's sort of,
And you're keeping it.
it's unstable, I'll say it's unstable down there, and you can fall down, and it's not necessarily the best place to be walking down to the creek.
Well, maybe it could be improved with funding someday, so that could be part of it. That's just my feeling on it. I've grown up in different communities. I grew up in Belmont, and they turned Twin Pines Park, used to be a sanitarium, they turned it a really great place. They're a city though. It's tougher in the county, I agree, but who is really in charge of that?
Well, it's part of it's private, part of it is private ownership into the creek, the adjacent property owners own it to the creek. Our flood control district is involved also with some management, they don't own it, but, private property owners
Who maintains the fence that everyone cuts every week? You know, I pick up the garbage, you know, and I. see
Well,
it.
property owners have their own fences, and then the county has fence here, you know, but the property owners have fences. By the way, when we first went with the reading garden here, the property owners over there were against it. Because they thought there was gonna be a bunch of loud noisy kids out there, and they're not. That was all ivy. And so part of it, we need to work with the neighboring property owners on all of this.
I'll try to step that up.
She calls, yeah, whoever, you're in charge, you go meeting. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I do think it's a mistake to think just because 10 years ago we couldn't get a tax measure passed and because 25 years ago. Because I mean, just look at the number of people who've come tonight, weekday night. Sorry, I have asthma, not COVID. I mean, there's enormous amount more energy in this community now, and it's growing with the Greener El Sobrante movements. We've got 3 different movements in this small town. I just want to say, I think there's real room for optimism. If we really decide,
Measure possibly, we should tax measure.
I think that if we really want to get this done, I think we have the push that we can organize.
Yes, I agree, you know.
Eddie, you were next, and then.
So I have a question. Suppose that the mechanics bank interactions led to some ability to purchase some property that we could, or acquire some territory that we could do something with, for either for free or for a very low price. Would acquisition of that land sort of exclude the possibility of getting an option on the land at around Maui?
No, I mean, I think as long as the cost of getting the option were reasonable and low, we could get an option, try to get an option on the Maui site. And then spend some time and then work on that. I mean, here's what we would do. If we got the mechanics bank site, what I would propose is we do a big committee process in El Sobrante, you hear from the community, and you could help with this.
Yeah.
What would that part, what should be there? I frankly think that, as much as there's been outreach, I know on the Maui side, if we eventually got money together to do something at Maui, I think I would advocate that we have a large community process again, take the information you've done and have a community process about what the public wants to see. For either side, I just think the community process would be really important and helpful and build support to get any grants.
So just some thinking regarding a potential mechanics bank site, if one were able to act quickly on that. And I don't know, I mean, of course, one will require a community process to determine what a park there would look like. But if we were able to construct a park that embodied a lot of the be used to sort of bolster our case to really do this beautiful long-term development on the Creekside area.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bottom line is Mechanics Bank's not, so far isn't doing anything with that site. What they have told us is that they like that site for a bank, but that they don't need all that part. Because that's not their model anymore, right? And they want to be a good community partner, and they maybe, I think, they're still a corporation, they're not locally owned anymore. And so if we're successful in getting them some of that lot, then we do a vision of what that would involve. And I know a lot of the businesses, we want to improve local business at town center, right? For people to come is a nice thing with a park, whatever that means. And then try to get an option here. This is probably more long-term, because the cost here because of the creek will probably be greater. And then give us time to explore contamination issues. I want to be clear. The county doesn't, or the city's not gonna do this, go out and buy property until they know what the exposure is on contamination. They don't. I'm dealing with residents in North Richmond who are really concerned, and they don't agree with the state Department of Toxic Substance Control is gonna do on ordering. People are really sensitive, and when you're gonna build a park, families care about what was the situation in that soil. And I think we owe it to get that finally done. Hopefully it's not much, but we don't know.
But it would just, the idea is using success
Yeah.
in one vision to support the other vision.
There'd be nothing wrong with having both sides of Dam Road having this and say, what I'd love to see with the general plan change, and I've talked to certain property owners I know, say you want to work and combine parcels. These individual small parcels are really hard to develop. I mean, if we're increasing the value of the property by making it mixed use. So it's not just commercial, you can build commercial with housing on top. And that will make it more vibrant, good for the businesses, money for parks, all of that. So we're doing that for the Appian Way and the Dam Road, right? So, but we've tried for years, we've already changed a lot of the Dam Road to some mixed use. What you've seen, we have not had development. And a lot of it's a function that the property owners aren't necessarily the same as the business owners. Many of them don't live here. There are some that do, and they're good people, and I've talked to some. But many of the sites, the tenants are different than the property owners. They're not used to putting any money in. They're not developers. They don't take risks. They're happy getting the rent. And what you really need is somebody to assemble some parcels, which is what we were prepared to do during redevelopment. But we set up redevelopment, but we didn't do eminent domain. That was 20 years ago. There were some residents here in El Sobrante who were really vocal about that.
So we convened, or your office really convened the work group, the
Yes.
park work group.
And we want to have another meeting now.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yes.
would really like to see
Okay.
at least an opportunity
Yeah.
for ongoing conversations,
On
you
this,
know,
right.
on this issue and exploring all of the different options and coming with grant ideas that are, you know, coming along. We plan to meet fairly regularly, see for ages, again, here and online, kind of do a similar hybrid model probably. We used to meet every month, the third Wednesday of the month at 7. I think we were interested in doing every other month, but we just wanna, catalyze on the energy in the room and keep working on both, you know, access to parks as well as all of the other issues that I mentioned before. So, if you haven't signed in, please sign in. Please.
And a number of you are how many of you are on the Parks here group? Is a number of you here?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're on it. Yeah, so we have, and so we'll assemble that. We did a lot of information gathering for that, which we talked about. By the way, just on looking at, I think the simplest thing is just, you don't need to set up a land trust and a special district. It'll be a county park. The county would be Public Works County. That's how you would do it. We've done special districts when it's a tax measure. If we don't do a tax measure, then we don't need to go the special district route. We can just make it through Public Works.
I have a question.
I think she has.
John, I appreciate your efforts and your political place, but I think this is really a place for like community grassroots activism now. And, you know, growing up in my little neighborhood, you know, next to Sue and Tara's joined us. Like if we had a very focused, so this is not necessarily like a question for you, but more of a discussion. If we had like a focused thing we were working on to raise money, like we action item to step, we would raise the money. I'm sure of it. Not my little 2 neighborhoods right over here by Clark Road, but when we were, but us and then your little neighborhood and your little neighborhood over there, like, or maybe we would get grants. You know more about that than I do, but if we just had something focused, because like when we were working on up Clark Road, Save the Richmond Hills, like we couldn't even, I know, we couldn't even sign the initiatives to protect the hills from land development because it was actually like Richmond. So we had to go out and find all these Richmond residents, not this unincorporated.
Which we first met.
Yeah, it was a huge part of that. But it was like, all these people got out and knocked on doors and asked for money and did it again and again and again, because it was also in many, many steps. So, if there was, I'm new to this group and you've been working on it for so long, but if there was one way we could just, maybe it was just the testing of the soil, if that's the first step.
Well, I mean, I'm
whatever
glad to
first
use,
step
we
is.
have park dedication upon it. Here's where your activism is can be really important. If we need to raise more money, $10 million to build a park, you know, and we said we just needed a tax measure for that, and we didn't need it for the maintenance. and there was amazing activism, building community support. I always think it's good to use that activism to go to the voters and get a personal tax cuts with the property owners are paying. So, I mean, I think that's the value, but the bottom line is activism, right, in general, and building support. And look, it's easy to get people to support a park. It's something else to get people to support paying for a park. And that's what we're trying to do, is how to get people to put money up, to pay for a park. And, you know, we could figure out, I think we have it in our memo, I'll pull it out. To raise 10 million, we could figure out how much per year we need to raise on the tax measure, because we get a bond, right? You're not raising 10 million at once. So, when we get our work group together, I'll pull out all that data we put together about, and we, you know, glad to look at that. I'm just saying, I grew up in this area, you know, in Richmond and in this area, and I've run dozens of campaigns and measures and things, and I'm just saying, it is really hard getting 2/3. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it would have taken an amazing amount of community activism. Elton County is changing, and there's a new generation of people moving here who I think are more supportive of a tax measure like this than it used to be. So I think it's worth it. I'm not discouraging, I'm saying, yes, do that. Maybe it's not asking for money I don't want you to go out and ask for money to do a soil study, because if we can get that another way, that's better. I'd rather have the activism to build support if we need to go to the ballot for capital. We don't need to, originally when we did our estimates to go to the ballot for capital and maintenance, it was a lot of money.
I'm just saying the support's gonna come in when they're seeing movement too.
Yes.
So if the soil samples it's like the intention's already there, it's happening, let's do it, now we need some more money from this, and people like give money, and then they see some more things happening, and then they're like, oh, you're
But
really
you need to
serious
show
about this.
something, doing a soil study is not something people can see, right? You need to do something people can see.
You need a thermometer
Well,
Teleport out.
well, you need to do something people can see happen, right?
Anyways,
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm new to this, but I like the idea of having an action step, like.
Yeah.
At the end.
We all want your energy, right?
Did you have another?
Yeah. All I was gonna say, and it was mentioned already, is, when I moved to El Sobrante, it was in the 80s, and there was a lot more farmy, you know, and horses, and that's part of what I liked about it. And I've watched it over time, you know, get less and less, but now people need the open space more, you know, because a lot of that open space is gone, and if we let it all disappear, it'll be not El Sobrante anymore.
Well, I will say, I appreciate, I used to be on East Bay Mud Board for 10 years, and we're fortunate to have East Bay Mud and East Bay Regional Park District protecting all this open space. I mean, that's what made this area amazing. It's not the same as a neighborhood park, but, I don't know when you apply for grants, whether that's looked at, because what happens is that could skew the number to show there's all this open space park, like Kennedy Grove, but it's not a neighborhood park, right? Which we want a neighborhood park. There's a lot of open space in this area. It's just not in the neighborhood.
Making a town center is something that we've talked about quite extensively on the map.
Right.
And so the park, in my view, needs to be part of that.
Yeah.
Which is one of the
Yeah.
reasons why I really am interested in the mechanics bank idea. Because at the moment, you just drive straight through the center of El Sobrante, you don't even notice it. There's nowhere for people to stop, there's nowhere to have a cup of tea, a cup of coffee.
Right.
It's a desert for that.
You know, and if we could do away with parking on one side of the street, we'd have a lot of options and then create some parking, off-street parking. Businesses all need the parking, but, you know, there was a lot of discussion over creating a parking area off so you can eliminate that parking and use it for a lane or bike lane and things
No one
like that.
uses it for parking. Now, when I park there sometimes, and it's taking your life in your hand. and you
Yeah.
go to the door.
Yeah,
It's all right.
Right.
Chamber.
Bottom line, is we're gonna get our work group meeting.
Great.
We'll put some stuff together. We'll just see if we get an update on some things, talk to the property owner about any interest on the option, get
And-
back to Mechanics Bank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll keep convening our community meetings and generating ideas as a group and, you know, figuring out what comes next.
Yes, well, back on what Nicole was saying about taking your life in your own hands. I really like the calming idea that we're doing on traffic, but I live by the post office and we already have that lane is used constantly by cars that are. Yes, and it's a real issue, and it scares me to go down, Valley View toward the freeway because or if I'm going to the post office, I don't know if somebody is using that lane, and it happens constantly. So I just want that to be in people's awareness, that if you're creating something, remember the effects that it's gonna have, because people aren't gonna, they already don't mind the rules on San Pablo Road, it's already scary enough, so we have to
Right.
find ways to
Well,
figure that
and
part of it
we're
out.
not gonna, we're not gonna do a park slash town center without all of your efforts. This is really, your effort is really important. And so it's great having all of you. Frankly, your effort when we get to doing the bike lane could be helpful, because getting a bike lane down here will also help build support. And so, because there will be people who will fight that bike lane.
The road diet survey, I think, is still open.
Yes.
And we can share a link out to that once we get everyone's emails, on our group. Any last questions for Gioia?
Just a comment, with the advent of e-bikes getting more and more popular, we should think about bike lanes more.
Yeah, well, there's a whole plan to do bike lanes, so I don't know, for the city and here, this is a regional route, and there's plenty of good planning on where bike lanes will go. The question is just changing the traffic, changing the configuration of the streets, getting the money to do it. But that's the plan. I'm on the Bay Conservation Development Commission, and every time we approved a new bridge, we required a bike lane on the bridge. The east span of the Bay Bridge has a bike lane, right?
Perhaps this is talking more about what Terry was mentioning, but perhaps an educational campaign that these are turning lanes, not passing lanes.
Right.
And then a enforcement campaign where you get the sheriff or highway patrol, or whoever's responsible, to give a few people tickets for doing it. I hope I'm not the person.
I know getting the businesses, I appreciate you being here in support of a park and town center is important. I know there's a limit on how much they can pay, right? Business improvement districts, they want to see something to benefit them, and that, it's hard to get those passed as well, I know. But, yeah.
It's hard enough to get merchants to pay $100 a year to join the chamber, so I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I want to respect people's times. I know we have listed 9 o'clock as the end time, but I have a 3-year-old at home eagerly waiting for me to get home. So,
You can take the 3-year-old to my office tomorrow for the IPF meeting. We're kid friendly. Bonnie will be there to keep an eye on things.
So thank you so much, everyone.
What is the next step?
Yeah, so just to mention that, we used to have like a big mailing list. We've converted over to Google Groups, which is the same format that that Soheila's great newsletter comes through too. So, we will add the emails that are listed here to that. We have our website as well as our Facebook. So I think for now, we will plan to, meet every other month on the 3rd Wednesday of the month. If this format works for folks, we can continue to try to do this hybrid, meeting at the library. So I see a thumbs up on Zoom. Thank you so much. And please let me know if you are interested in joining our board of directors. We're supposed to meet, I think, quarterly. We can turn our regular group meetings into board meetings, like we can be creative about, not being too much of a commitment. And we just, wanna, get that staffed up again.
Yeah, no, we made sure that the library for our map and other community meetings would have a hybrid setup here, so we can exactly do this kind of.
They need a camera though, this is our own personal
We
camera.
we have one, but we should figure out the library, we bring our own, right?
Or an owl to rent.
Yeah, we
or something.
should bring,
Yeah.
we'll follow up on that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, and thank you folks on Zoom. I don't know, oh, here I am. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Remember to come 3rd Saturday cleanup. I think I'm off.
I'll be there.
We heard you.
Yay. Okay,
I'll
good.
be there.